Good evening, everybody. My name is Todd Scholl. I'm the lead learner at the South Carolina Education Association Center for Educator Wellness and Learning. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am so excited about tonight. There's so many great things that we're going to be doing. We're going to kick things off with a conversation with Lisa Ellis, who is a candidate for South Carolina Superintendent of Education. Before we jump into that, though, I want to bring in our president, Sherry East. And Sherry's going to be talking to us tonight about how we made that selection to endorse Lisa and how our political action committee works. So, Sherry, welcome. And I'm going to turn it over to you for a little bit, and you can explain that process to our listeners.
Thank you, Todd, for all you do for the SCEA. We love all the great things you're doing. But tonight is very important that we learn about our political action committee and we get a moment to talk with Lisa. So the SCA has an actual PAC. It's an official PAC funder of the Political Action Committee, and it's called the South Carolina Fund for Children in Public Education. And its purpose, its sole purpose, is to recommend and support candidates that support public education. And it doesn't matter to us if you're a Democrat or if you're a Republican, we will support, or a different kind of party. Like we have interviewed the Green Party, Libertarian Party. So we really are a bipartisan group that will support folks that support our public education and public education in South Carolina. So the process to get started would be we send out a questionnaire for the elections. And then from the questionnaire, we review those and see if the candidate's values would align with our mission of public education in South Carolina. Then we set up interviews with a screening team and from people from across the state, because this is a statewide office. We did have a screening process for these candidates, and it started back in the primary. Melissa wasn't the only person that went through our process. We had Republicans and Democrats go through this process. So after that, we do research on the area, the candidate. Let's say we're talking about a House race or a Senate race. It'd be a House race this time around. We look at things like, is the candidate, sometimes it's hard because you look at the viability of a candidate. You look at the polling data for that area. You look at the fundraising. And sometimes we make decisions or we decide to stay out of a race based on the viability of a candidate, the voting history in the area. So there's a lot that goes into it. It's not just like, oh, the SCA likes or dislikes somebody. There is a PAC process that we use that everyone has an equal shot at getting a recommendation from the SCA. And from then, we work on a get out the vote strategy to try to help our candidates win. So we try to engage our membership and other voters in making sure that we elect pro-public education candidates. One important thing that we hear sometimes is, oh, I don't want my dues dollars going to that candidate. I don't join you because you're too political. This is one thing that sets us apart from other organizations is, yes, we are political. Yes, we have a PAC. Yes, we make tough decisions sometimes around political endorsements, because we feel that it's very important into everything that goes on in your classroom. You may not connect the dots to politics and your textbooks or your paycheck or your insurance, but I promise you that all of those decisions are politically made by someone that has been elected, either your school board official, your House member, your Senate, the governor. So, you may not like politics. Sometimes I don't like it either, but it is a very important part of our profession. And we really need to take, especially this race, seriously. It's the Superintendent of Education race. So that's a little bit about how we get our political candidates endorsed. No dues dollars ever go toward this. So you're not paying for political action. That is a separate fund that's set up. It's voluntary. People give to the PAC of their own free will. No one is forcing anyone into using their membership dollars for PAC funds. So again, we appreciate Lisa joining us tonight, and you, Todd, and Colleen, for all the work that you've put into this. If you do enjoy the PAC process and this part of being an educator, please reach out to us. We have a place for you. We have a seat at the table for everybody to join the SCA family. So back to you, and I'll be glad to answer any questions in the chat later if anybody has anything.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for that explanation, Sherry, and thank you so much for your leadership and the time and energy that goes into making all this work. And democracy sometimes is messy, but it's important that we hear from all of our members because we are a member-led organization. So, and we appreciate you leading our members, Sherry. But let's bring in the star for tonight, Lisa Ellis, who is a candidate for South Carolina Superintendent of Education. Lisa, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. I've been back at school for 2 days now and excited to be back and getting ready to welcome our students in, I guess, another week and a half, maybe 2 weeks. Students come Wednesday the 17th. So lots to do before that in terms of getting ready and getting the students ready, but it's been great to be back.
I think that's so amazing to consider that we have someone running for superintendent of education who's not just an educator, but an active educator. And I think that's so inspirational to a lot of educators who, maybe wonder, can I even run for office? And you're leading the way, giving them a template saying, yes, you can run for office and you can still teach too. So that's a wonderful thing. What I would like you to do is I imagine there's a few people who might be watching tonight or who might watch the repost of this. Tell us the story of Lisa Ellis. Who is Lisa Ellis?
I mean, wow. It's like one of those in 2 minutes or less, right? Sum up 46 years. I am a native of South Carolina, born and raised here. Went out of state to college, to Roanoke College for a year and a half. Actually played basketball for them my freshman year, which I guess is a fun fact. And then transferred back because I just really wanted to be closer to family. So I transferred back to College of Charleston and finished my degree there. Actually majored in English and minored in Spanish. And throughout college, I think what is one of the pivotal messages of how I became an educator is I was a camp counselor at YMCA Camp Greenville, which is just a fantastic place to be. And so I was one of those ones that didn't really know what I wanted to do after college. And so I worked at Camp Greenville for a year teaching their fall, spring, where school groups come up and all of that. And realized that because my background was English, I didn't really know a lot of the science. I took the information they gave me and, taught it and all of that. So I decided to go back to graduate school at Clemson to get a master's in forest resource management. And about halfway through, I realized that it wasn't necessarily the science that I loved, it was the teaching. And so once I graduated from Clemson with my first master's, I went through critical needs, which is now the state's PACE program. And so I'm a teacher who was alternative certification, took that route and started teaching at Ridgeview High School. So that was fall of 2000. I went as a long-term substitute for a teacher on maternity leave. And worked there for 14 years. I was an English teacher there for 5 and then moved into director of student activities and loved that job. I really do enjoy it. And just sort of, found a home and then ended up changing schools, going back into the classroom in 2014, 15 at Blythewood High School as an English teacher. And really just started to notice the shift in education in a lot of ways, from parent support to accountability to testing overload, all of that stuff, and started sort of becoming disgruntled, honestly, about the expectations of teachers. From there, I went to Fairfield Middle School as an instructional coach. So I was working with teachers there. Did that for 2 years and then followed that principal to Hand Middle School in Richland 1, where I taught leadership there to 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. And then realized quickly that middle school was not the place for me. And so I had the opportunity to go back to Blythewood High School under my amazing principal to teach journalism and media production and media broadcast. And really loved that, mainly because it was an elective. So it wasn't tested. I sort of got to create, there was a curriculum, but was able to be very creative in it. The curriculum was really relevant to students and was able to build that program. And then last year I started back in the position of director of student activities, but at a new school. And that's really where my passion, I've learned, is being able to to help build leadership skills and service skills in student leaders. And then, of course, planning school-wide events. And so, that's been my career trajectory. In the time, I also 4 years ago founded SC for Ed, because I really was shocked at how teachers were being treated, but how many were leaving, and realized, started that advocacy journey. And as Sherry mentioned about, every classroom decision is made by an elected official. So really started fighting and encouraging teachers and, support staff to fight for the well-being of themselves, but ultimately you're helping students. When you advocate for better working conditions, you're advocating for better student learning conditions. And so here I am. I did not expect to run for superintendent of education. I actually spent 2 years trying to find other people to do it who I thought were, wildly qualified and would do a great job. And they all said no. And I can remember talking to my parents end of February, talking about, what was sort of coming out ahead and just being real concerned. And I remember telling my dad, him saying, you don't want to run. You don't want to run for political office. And me saying, I've got to try, because I don't want to regret not trying to see if I can make a difference. And so, once I made that decision, my parents, of course, were wildly on board, and they're my number 1 and 2 volunteers. But I just feel that we're at a crossroads with public education in South Carolina. And, I sort of feel, I think as teachers, we sort of tend to shy away from really stepping out and being, involved in our own advocacy process. And so part of this, me running, is me saying, like you said, not necessarily an example, but me saying, hey, if I'm willing to step out and be uncomfortable and run for this, then maybe you can have a conversation with your principal about whatever issue is bothering you. That we realize that we grow when we're uncomfortable, but being uncomfortable is tough. But we've got to be willing to do it, especially if we expect our students to be uncomfortable, because that's when you learn and grow and become better. So, that's the professional side. The personal side is I have a sweet dog named Bonnie who, helps take care of me, and amazing family. Favorite band is Bon Jovi. Currently rewatching The Good Place for probably the 6th time when I have time to turn on the TV, and just have an amazing supportive network of friends and family.
Wow. Yeah. There's so much there. And it's funny how when you're in education long enough, you like connect with people. And Sonny Williams taught with you at Rich.
Yes.
With you, and
yes.
he's one of my best friends. We've been best friends for like 30 something years. And he says to say hello, and he's so excited.
Please tell him hello. We had some good laughs at Ridgeview, some good times. And it's such a small world, when you start, again, when you've been in, like you said, been in it as long as, well, I still think I'm 25. But. Right.
Yeah, we won't talk about that. A lot of people across the state got to know you as you developed the SC for Ed organization. And I kind of have like a 2-part question. One is, how did your work with SC for Ed prepare you for this moment? And how do you plan? I know one of the things that it helped prepare you for is you got to have a kind of thick skin. As soon as you put yourself out there and you start sharing your ideas and sharing messages, no matter what, you're going to get hit, you're going to get criticized. And that's a really hard thing for anybody to absorb over a long period of time. So how did your work with SC for Ed prepare you for this? And 2, how do you plan on responding to what's likely going to be some very harsh criticism and some kind of terrible narratives that are going to be thrown at you, and ideas and associated with your name that are going to be thrown your way. How do you plan on dealing with that? So that's a two-part question.
Okay, great questions. SC for Ed really helped prepare me in several different ways. First and foremost, having to go back and relearn how a bill becomes a law. We laugh as, one of our first sort of unofficial board meetings was going back and watching the Schoolhouse Rocks, how a bill becomes a law, to do that. Learning to read policy and law and understand how that translates into, policy, those sort of things. And really, one of the things that I think SC for Ed has been really successful at is translating the law into what I like to call normal speak, and just trying to educate, teachers and support staff and really encourage their own, involvement in it. So that's one thing, just, and really, diving into school funding and having those, the opportunities to have those conversations with Frank Rainwater at Revenue and Fiscal Affairs, and, getting to talk to legislators and having them explain different processes and different perspectives, because it's one thing to, think policy, but understand that the different perspectives and how that policy is implemented is really important. And I think that, one of our big pushes is that the teacher voice has been missing for so many years, and needs to be at the table, because the policy can be all good and well, but the way that it's implemented is often extremely different from what it was intended to do. And so being able to have those conversations and learn and listen, and do it and just do that. I think the second piece of it is just the opportunity to go out and meet with educators across the state, and realize that, because we have so many school districts, there's a lot of, inequities depending on where you work. And so being able to have those conversations and help navigate, okay, what is a state issue versus what is a local issue, and what are the best ways to address those things. So, it really has been a great experience. It's been very frustrating at times, in the sense that every year that we don't really improve public education, we're losing a group of kids. And I think for me, as somebody who's in the classroom and sees those, like, I have to look my students in the eyes and see the impact of poor policy on them, that's really tough to take. And so that has been, I have really been disappointed in how slow things move. But evidently that's just how it is. I believe that things can always change. So I think those are some things that that will help the process moving forward. To answer your second question, yeah, I think that's, again, one way that SC for Ed has also helped is because, as we have been called every name in the book, and, and been just really challenged, particularly over the last 2.5 years with COVID, and us, really pushing, virtual, and then pushing masking, and just some really politically controversial issues, which shouldn't have been political in the first place. I still, stand by it should have been safety first. But, just I think we joke that, I've been called a communist, a Marxist, a Nazi, left-wing socialist, which I'm like, I can't be all of those things at the same time. Like,
Yeah.
And then, there were the threats that we were starting to see, and just that, just threats against teachers and stuff like that. So that was all unnerving, I think, but did help prepare.
Yeah.
But Todd, I think at the end of the day, like, I know who I am. I know what I stand for, and as hard it is probably going to get, you know, as long as what I am doing in this role is in the best interest of students, then I'm going to be able to lay my head down on the pillow at night or look myself in the mirror and be okay with that. And, you know, knowing that it's not personal, that, you know, people that are going to be criticizing me and calling me names and, you know, doing all of that, they don't know me from, right, you know, Adam or anybody else. You know, like I said, I have a real strong support network of family and friends who know me and will keep it real with me. But, you know, and I have so much awe and respect for people who have allowed me to be their friends that I think that's what is, I'm just going to have to remember and just, you know, stay true to my values and, you know, doing what is right for students and all of that. And that will be the key.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there. Ultimately, a lot of the attacks that will be made will be completely hollow. And I think if we're really clear in articulating and on sort of deconstructing those attacks, you just have to try to have faith that the South Carolina public will see through how hollow those attacks are, and that they're ultimately just meaningless and just divisive rhetoric designed to gin up fear and anger, but there's really no substance there.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I also think that, you know, we have to, democracy is not passive. It is active. As a society, as citizens of the United States of America and as citizens of South Carolina, we have to take an active role in democracy. And so, you know, part of that, obviously, of course, is voting, and voting in every single election you can, and also knowing who you're voting for. You know, I'm sure we're going to hit on that in a minute. But more importantly is, you know, if you're in a situation where you hear some of the rhetoric, you know, forcing yourself to critically think through what is being stated, and then, you know, and then questioning it or asking questions. You know, we talk about, you know, some of the buzzwords now are indoctrination or, you know, that sort of thing, but asking whoever is saying that, tell me what you mean by that.
Right.
Tell me where you've seen that happen in, you know, your child's education or something like that. Right. But being willing, and it goes back to the being uncomfortable piece, right? We've got to be willing to stand up, and educators in particular, we've got to be willing to stand up for our profession and stand up for ourselves and really fight for what we know as educators are best practices. And you know, that can be within your family, that can be within your friend set, but it's no longer okay. We are not in a time period where we can just sit back and watch the volley like we're watching a tennis match. We have to get actively involved.
100%. I agree with you 100%. I want to bring in Colleen O'Connell, the amazing Colleen, who is going to take a minute to talk to us about some voter information. So Colleen, take it over.
Hey y'all, my name is Colleen O'Connell. I am a middle school teacher who now has the privilege and honor of working in the Office of Public Affairs for the South Carolina Education Association. And one thing I want to share with y'all is some information about making sure that you are registered to vote, that you're registered in time, and that you are able to exercise your right to vote. So I know you've seen in the chat a few times on Facebook, the SCEA.org/votes. Even if you just go to our homepage, it is linked there as well. And on this page, one of the first things you'll see is election information. So it gives you information about the ways that you can vote. One of the things that changed this legislative session is that even though it's no longer available for everyone to be able to request absentee ballots, we do now have 2-week, no excuse early voting. So one thing to make sure is that you are registered in time and then you vote early. So if you need to check your voter registration information, you can click right here. It'll take you to the portal where you check your registration. You're going to tell them you're not a robot. put in your county, your first, your last name, your date of birth, and the last four of your social. And then it should bring up your voter record. If you are someone like me who has an apostrophe in your name and it gives you an error and you're like, I'm pretty sure I'm registered, try it again with or without the apostrophe. If you are not yet registered, here are these critical deadlines that you need to know. So if you want to register online, you can actually do that through the voter registration portal. And it starts off with whether you have a valid South Carolina driver's license, or maybe you don't have a license or you have an out-of-state license, you would go for that one. And it walks you through. And if there's anything that needs to be clarified, your local county board will reach out to you. You'd want to do that by October 9th. I recommend doing it right now if you're not registered though. In addition, you can download and complete a registration form and mail it in. This is how I chose to do it. You don't have to do it that way though. I'm sometimes a little old-fashioned. Maybe it's the former English teacher in me. I just love sending mail and putting that stamp on it and supporting the post office. And then if you're doing it by mail, it has to be postmarked by October 11th. If you're getting really close to that deadline, like let's say it's October 10th and you need it postmarked by October 11th, so before October 11th, walk into the post office and ask them to stamp it right then so it has that postmark on it. And if you're going to register in person, which is the most surefire way that it's done and it's done on time, you can do it at the local county board of voter registration. And this will help you find it here, no matter what county you live in. Or you can do it at your local DMV. So let's say you need to update your license, you have to do anything else at the DMV, you can do it while you're there. And a few other public assistance agencies also make it possible for you to do it there as well. The most important thing to remember is that you have to be registered by these deadlines, but you should probably do it beforehand. Then once early voting opens on October 24th, go vote early in person, get it done. You can get your nice sticker, put out that selfie and hashtag it the SCEA votes and Team Lisa. And this gives you all the information you need to do early voting. One important thing to remember is that when you go for early voting or day of election voting, you need your photo ID. So a South Carolina driver's license would qualify you for that. If you don't drive, but you need a South Carolina ID, one of the great things is that for free, you can get a photo ID for voting. You just want to make sure that you have it in time. If for some reason you can't, on that day, they may allow you to utilize a provisional ballot. Just make sure, though, that you have an ID before Election Day. If you have any issues with getting any of that information, reach out to your local county board of elections, which again, you can. County Board of Voter Registration, find your county, give them a call if you're having trouble with anything with getting registered to vote. Because it's your right, you get to exercise it. So now that we've gone through all that information, also on the SCEA vote site, the recommendation process appears there. And if you wanted to learn more about the state superintendent candidates, before the primary, every candidate received a copy of the questionnaire. You can see a quick chart of how they answered. You can also open up detailed responses. If responses aren't there, it does mean a candidate did not return or respond to the questionnaire. So I'm going to pause that. And do you have anything to add, Todd? I know that was a lot of talking.
No, it's really important. Everybody who's listening, if you're not registered to vote, to go register to vote as soon as possible. That's critical for educators to do. And anybody who cares about public education, who wants to support Lisa Ellis, please, please, please make sure that you're registered to vote and bring people with you. If you have kids who just turned, my son is just turning 18 in August. I just asked him tonight. I said, you're registered. You're going to register to vote. He's like, I've already handled it, Dad. I'm good. So it's like everybody, not just yourself. You make sure everybody's registered to vote. Talk to your colleagues, talk to your family, and get registered to vote for sure.
100%. I know that my first person that encouraged me to register to vote was my AP government teacher, Mr. Todd Novak. And ever since then, no matter what, if I move, the first thing I do is check my voter registration. And before we move on, we're going to take a quick 2-minute break because we want to make sure that you can share information you need with us. There should be a link in the Facebook live chat at the scea.org/connect. And here, there's information that we're just wanting to get a little information from you about what things most interest you, what you're most passionate about. And one thing that's really awesome is that if you have an Amazon wish list or Donors Choose, you can slap that link in there, because we know that sometimes districts don't want you to advertise your list directly, but we're able to get around that by creating a forum where donors can go and find educators in their area to donate to.
Awesome.
One awesome thing is that one person who fills out the survey tonight will win a $50 gift card. We're going to give you a little time to do that. So I'm going to set a 2-minute timer similar to the timers I used when I was a classroom teacher.
Sweet. And we're going to come back with more Lisa Ellis in 2 minutes. So if you'll fill the survey out, we'll be back with Lisa and learn more about her platform in just 2 minutes. I feel like we need some music.
Need the Jeopardy, the final Jeopardy music.
Somebody asked for music.
Yeah.
Actually, you know what? I'm not going to play music because if we play it on Facebook Live, we could get copyright infringement. Not that it's happened to me before.
And then they'll strip out all the audio and While we're doing this too, for those who may be done or whatever, I just want to give Lisa's website out, lisaforsc.com. That's another website, lisaforsc.com. There you can learn more about Lisa's platform, donate, look at the events that she has coming up. Everything you need to know about Lisa's campaign is at lisaforsc.com. So this is really important. This form that we have up here at the scea.org/connect, this really helps us connect with more and more people. And the key is bringing people together so that we can have a collective voice. This is really important for you to fill this out so that we can stay in touch with you and communicate the things we have going on. And who couldn't use a $50 gift card? I mean, that's pretty awesome. Am I eligible, Colleen, for that, or no? I'm not eligible for the $50 card, am I?
No, however, we would not mind if you filled it out because your voice is also important to us, Todd. But if you win, we're redrawing for some other educator to be able to get what they need.
Fine. All right, we're gonna bring Lisa back on. Lisa, so what I'm curious about what it is that when you if you were to be elected, what is it that you would hope to accomplish in your first term?
Well, let me just, before I answer that question, in full transparency, I have been drinking, but it is a bubbly, so I don't want anybody to think or judge in any way. So Todd, it's funny that you asked that because I have, in deciding to run, I was really torn because I love my job. I love where I'm at. And, the thought of leaving my students and my school is really tough. And I don't, that's something that would have to deal with, but it really was a tough decision to put my hat in the ring because of that. And so I tell people that my goal is to get elected, fix education in 4 years, and then go back to the classroom, where I'm happiest working with students. So, that's a lot to accomplish in 4 years. But I think, the number one issue that we have in education in South Carolina is the teacher shortage. And you could go even further and say the bus driver shortage, the instructional assistant shortage, but any of that school-based personnel, we have, a shortage, and all of the sort of secondary problems directly come back to the fact that we don't have enough teachers in classrooms. And so, that's the number one issue that we've got to address immediately. And, having talked with teachers and educators across South Carolina, particularly with SC for Ed for the last 4 years, it boils down to salary and then working conditions, and salary we're going to have to continue to work with, and that's going to be a collaboration with the General Assembly, and of course, depending on the budget each year and stuff like that. But working conditions are what we can really start to immediately address. And I think that, that's something that the Department of Ed can really start looking immediately at their policies or the policies that are there, and answer the questions of how is this, again, going back to that question, how is this helping students? Is this helping students? And I think a lot of times is this helping teachers is directly connected to is this helping students? And so, there's policies that we really need to either, revoke or, realign or adjust to make it easier on schools to do really the important work of educating students. And then I think also we've got to remove the barriers that are preventing, future teachers from getting into the profession. And, one of those barriers that we continue to hear about is passing the praxis. And, we've got a lot of teachers that are currently teaching, have demonstrated, mastery of teaching and all of that, but are currently on substitute pay because they can't pass this one high stakes 1 day test. And so, we've got to look at ways to encourage the teachers that do want to come into the profession and are working towards that, make it a little bit easier on them to get, their place in the classroom. And so, a lot of that is going to be looking at, what is Department of Ed policy? What is district policies? Those are some things that probably need to be looked at. And then how are we interpreting state law? And so that would be sort of the immediately going into office, what I would want us to focus in on. And then of course, testing, right? Over testing. And I think, byproduct or something that causes a lot of the issues in schools is how is our school report card and how we're measured. But I think that's going to be a little bit longer work just because we've got to work with the Education Oversight Committee and that sort of thing. But we've also, we've got to start asking the right questions, and we've got to move away from the way that we've always done it, or this one size fits all approach, because ultimately we talk about at the school level that we are preparing students for jobs that don't exist yet. And we can't continue to do that under an industrialized model of education.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree 100% with you. The metrics that we use to say whether you're a good school, which is how we use the report card, what that does is it has those downstream effects of that. Well, then the school modifies itself to perform as well as they can on that report card metric, whatever the metrics are. And if the metrics aren't right, then the school warps itself in ways that are not necessarily good for educators or students. And I think that that's one of the keys to, in terms of improving working conditions, getting those metrics right will improve working conditions and learning conditions. So I'm so glad to hear you say that. What would be your message to parents? We hear a lot about parents And we've heard a lot about it in the primaries. We heard a lot about parent voice and that kind of thing. You've seen this become a major issue. How do you address? I think it's pretty clear most educators and support staff are going to be on your side. What's your message to parents as you move forward into the fall?
I think that, our campaign is talk about the student success triangle, and what I've said for years that there's 3 points to the triangle that determine whether a student is going to be successful. And, it's the student, him or herself, the parents, or the adults in the student's life, and then the teachers. And, depending on, and this is where I wish I had done better in geometry, but, that influence is going to shift as the student moves through K through 12. So for example, when they're in early childhood, elementary, there's going to be a lot more responsibility on the parents, right? Because the student is not developmentally, ready to handle a lot of responsibility. But as they move up through middle school and then into high school, it needs to shift towards there's more and more responsibility on the student, because they're ultimately, I teach high school students, and, I tell them in 4 years or 3 years or 2 years or 1 year, you're going to be out on your own, responsible for your own destiny. So you've got to own your own responsibility. And so it's not that the parent and teacher absolve themselves from it, but they are sort of in a supportive role, but they're putting the responsibility back on the student, because again, that student, as I've always told my students, I'm trying to help you become a responsible tax-paying citizen. Like that's
Right.
my goal for you. And so, I think that, and there's been that shift from parent involvement to less parent involvement. And I think that, it comes from both sides. You have sort of the parents who, didn't necessarily have a good experience in their own educational journey. And so they are very wary of schools and all of that. I think that, you have over the last several years, you've got the narrative where there's been the lack of trust on teachers. And, what we talk about is the parent or the adult knows their child, or should know their child, the best. And the teacher gets to know the child, but the teacher knows what needs to be taught the best. And so it needs to be a partnership of how do we best teach this child based on your knowledge of them as a human versus my knowledge of the content and curriculum and the relationship. And so, I have been really surprised by the narrative of parents aren't involved, because I have never worked at a school, and I've worked at 4 schools and 3 school districts, that has not begged for parents to come in and be a part of their child's education, whether it be from volunteering during the school day, particularly in elementary and middle schools, to, attending open houses or meet and greets, or, college nights, depending on whatever, or sporting events, right? Whatever it is at the high school level. And so to hear that teachers don't want parents involved, or schools don't want parents involved, is just it's just misinformation. We would love to have parents involved in SICs, our school improvement councils, PTOs, education foundations, volunteering. One of the things that we talked about is the 30-minute unencumbered time for teachers. One way that schools can get that to work is by having parent volunteers come in. And, that's been a little bit hard over the last couple of years because of COVID. But as we, we're not moving out of COVID, right? Let's talk about the numbers. That's a whole different topic. But as we continue to have in-person schooling, we want that parent input. We want that parent feedback, but we also want parents to respect the role of the teacher. And, I think that has become a little bit more difficult I've seen that change in my own career. Like I can, I'm talk about the good old days of, you called the parent, the student was struggling and you called the parent and they would say, well, we'll get it taken care of. And, I've more recently had the conversations of, the student is struggling and it's, well, what are you doing to cause them to struggle? And it's not, I'm like, I mean, I can't, the kid's got to turn in work. Like I can't do anything if the kid's not turning in any work. And so, I don't think that narrative is accurate. I think that it's a lot of things at play. And then we've also, as schools, got to make it more accessible. If you've got adults that are working multiple jobs, and I think that's where one of the silver linings out of has been the move to more Zoom meetings. So our school does a lot of meetings over Zoom, so the adult doesn't necessarily have to take off a half day of work or a full day of work to come to the meeting. They can just log in and be a part of the conversation. So I think schools have also got to be willing to be creative on what that looks like. And food always helps. Providing food always gets people in the door.
Yeah, and I would, I think that's such a great point. All the people who are kind of pushing false narratives, I think just an invitation to all of them to go and volunteer at a school in your area and see what's really going on in classrooms and then across the school. I think they'd be shocked to find that no one's being indoctrinated into Marxism. No one's being indoctrinated really into anything other than maybe, have some good manners, work hard, that kind of thing. There's not really this subversive stuff going on in the way I think people are perceiving it. They're just hearing this from certain news outlets and websites and things like that. And then it's like a panic that's created. And we've had these types of panics before. We've had the Red Scare and the Satanic Panic and all these things that have happened where you rile up the community with this false narrative and gin up this fear and anger, and they start to believe that that's reality. And the best way for these people to see what is real is go to your school, invite, ask if you can help out at your school. And there's so many different ways that people can volunteer at their school.
Absolutely. And I would even add in, have conversations with your children. Have conversations with your grandchildren, have conversations with your neighbors' children, and ask them, we talk about again, as a surly teenager, the parents would say, well, what'd you learn at school today? Nothing, but reframe the question to, tell me your favorite part of the school day, opening back up that dialogue. Because, again, I teach teenagers, they're going to tell you the truth. They're going to tell you like it is. But be willing to, because I think that's part of it is we talk about the they and the them and the other, and, these teachers that are indoctrinating. But when you say, well, how do you feel about little Lisa's teacher? And they're like, oh, we love Miss Ellis. She takes such good care of of them and blah, blah, blah. And then you're like, but you just said that, like making those personal connections, because I think once you drill down and have those conversations about, well, what is your child's teacher, your grandchild's teacher, or what were your own teachers like? We talk about the fact that most people can name every teacher they had from K through 12. And it's because you build those relationships, you have such an influence, positive influence but we forget that, or we leave that part out of the narrative. And then social media, don't even get me started on that. So. Yeah. I think that social media is just driven by algorithms and just manufactures outrage more than anything else. I want to leave you with an opportunity to recruit some help. I know there's some easy ways people can support your campaign. Obviously, get registered to vote, plan on voting, get out there and vote. And then as much as we do have some criticisms of social media, I'm
on social media, reposting things that you're putting out there, especially events and information that's critical. And then, of course, donating is a huge thing. What would be your pitch to people who are watching tonight who maybe want to get involved in your campaign? What are some things that you need, and how can they get involved in your campaign?
Yeah, thank you so much for asking that. I think, what is really important to understand that is different about this campaign than other campaigns and more traditional campaigns is that I'm back in school. So, from 8 to 4, or if I have later events, I'm out of pocket. I can't do any campaigning. I can't talk about it. I'm really too busy working with students and educating them. And so that's really where people can help. In terms of, understanding or being willing to call people on my behalf and tell them about, the office and why I'm running, like you said, to repost on social media, those sort of things, because there's only so many hours in the day. And if I'm unavailable for a good chunk of them, I'm going to need all the help that I can. And we've got a large number of volunteers that have signed up and trying to get the word out. And then, even if it's not in an official capacity, just talking to your network of people and explaining why this election is so important. And, because my opponent and I are extreme in our belief systems, and just having those conversations. And then, of course, I have been amazed at how much money it takes to run a campaign. It's really kind of disgusting. And, just trying to the amount of money that things cost, from digital media to yard signs to stamps, because stamps just went up for postcards. And so really, donating any little bit counts. I know that, most of our listeners are probably teachers that are trying to, rub 2 pennies together to make 5 cents. But any little bit helps. Or if you have more than a little bit, that makes it a lot easier on us to get the message out to the state of South Carolina, since this is a statewide event. Also, my goal is to make it to every county once to meet people. And I really want to hear back about what your education experience is, because I want to take all of that knowledge and information and make great policy changes, when I'm in the role of superintendent. And so, lots of ways to connect. But I think, if you can volunteer time to call, if you can text people, if you can, stop people in the grocery store. My mother is my number one volunteer because she talks to everybody and hands out the little information cards. It doesn't matter who it is. And also, just like Colleen said, encouraging people to get registered to vote. I was shocked by the number of people in South Carolina who don't vote. And, when you don't see the changes that you want, but you're not voting, you have no one but yourself to blame, right? It goes back to that taking an active role in our democracy. But yes, whatever people can do to help, this campaign, because we're at a crossroads with education. And my goal is to help South Carolina have access to a high quality education, so they can live strong, fulfilled lives.
Well, I just want to remind all the teachers out there, just because you can't necessarily campaign for Lisa during the school day or on school equipment doesn't mean that you aren't a citizen. You also get to be politically active after the school day. When you go home, you can do all the political campaigning that you want. As long as you're not doing it through those school resources, you have that freedom and you have that right and responsibility as a citizen of South Carolina. And those that aren't teaching, obviously she's going to need help during the day. So anything you can do, if you're not an educator, please help out. Lisa, thank you so much for spending so much time with us tonight. And thank you for having the courage and the energy and the passion to run. I'm sure it was not an easy decision to throw your hat in the ring. That's got to be really had to be somewhat intimidating. But I think there are a lot of educators across the state who are inspired by you, who care about you, who want to see you win, and that we have your back. And I'm so proud of the SCEA for being an association that is willing to put its weight behind you and help you out in any way that we can. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you for those kind words, and of course the support of the SCEA and its members. And it's always a pleasure to talk to you, Todd, and Sherry and Colleen. So it has been delightful.
We wish you the best of luck. I want to remind all of our listeners, if you want to support Lisa, go to lisaforsc.com. That's lisaforsc.com. And if you'd like to join our movement, you can go to jointhescea.org. It is going to be critically important that educators get together, that we unite and come together to help save public education. And one of the best ways we can do that is to come together through the SCEA and also come together to support Lisa Ellis for South Carolina Superintendent of Education. Thanks for everybody tuning in tonight. Again, thanks to Lisa Ellis. Thanks to our president, Sherry East. Thanks so much to Colleen O'Connell, who's been running things behind the scenes and supporting the work that we do. She's an invaluable asset at the SCEA. Sherry, it's good to see you. Lisa and everybody else, have a wonderful night. Lisa for SC.com.
Good night, y'all.